皆様、今日はお忙しいところ、私の記者会見に来ていただきまして、ありがとうございます。
So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming in spite of your busy schedules to attend my press conference today.
パリの新聞社襲撃事件で多数の記者たちが亡くなったこと、本当にショックを受けています。
I find it very, very shocking that several reporters were killed yesterday in Paris.
1987年5月に私の朝日新聞での同じ同期の記者、小尻智弘記者がやはり支局に襲撃されて殺されたという事件がありました。
Many of you may remember this, but in May of 1987, there was a similar incident in my own Asahi newspaper, in the Kobe office or the Hanshin office of my Asahi newspaper. A young man, a reporter who was actually my doki or my colleague, we entered the newspaper in the same year, a man named Tomohiro Kojiri. He was also shot and killed.
改めてそのことを思い出して、ショック、今回の事件を本当に衝撃を受けて受け止めております。
So partly because of my terrible memories of that period, the events of yesterday, it was very shocking to me and brought back horrible feelings.
同じジャーナリストとしてこうした暴力には絶対に屈してはいけないというふうに改めて思いました。
However, hearing the news yesterday, it made me realize that I must be even stronger than ever in my resolve not to ever bend down or to be crushed by violence.
私が非常勤講師として勤めています北西学園大学にも昨日また脅迫状が送られてきました。
As was mentioned earlier by the MC, I'm working as a part-time lecturer at Hokusei Gakuin University in Hokkaido, and yesterday that university received another threatening letter.
匿名の名に隠れてこうした卑劣な脅迫行為は絶対に許すことができないと思います。
I think it is quite terrible of them to disguise their identity, to send an anonymous letter of this kind, and to threaten a university. This kind of action cannot be allowed to continue.
なぜ北西学園大学に脅迫状が来るかと言いますと、私がそこに勤務しているからであります。
Of course, I think you understand why Hokusei Gakuin University is receiving these kinds of threatening letters. It is because they have employed me as a lecturer.
去年、日本の週刊誌、週刊文春という週刊誌の記事で、私が捏造記者というふうにレッテル貼りをされました。
As many of you know, last year in the Japanese weekly magazine called Shukan Bunshu, and there was an article that basically labeled me as a reporter who fabricates stories, a fabricating reporter.
それで全く私の記事とは関係ない大学にまでこういうふうな脅迫行為が及んでいるわけです。
As a result of that article, there has been progressive attacks directed against me, and it has become enlarged enough so that these attacks have expanded to include this university, which has nothing to do with anything I've done in the past.
私は訴訟準備のために東京にいましたんで、大学の方には行ってなかったんですが、改めて、私のためにこういうふうに大学が脅迫にさらされることに心が痛みます。
Because I was in Tokyo for some time now, preparing for the lawsuit that I'm going to be filing. As a result, I was not at the university in Hokkaido for some time. However, when I heard the details of the threatening letters and calls, etc., that they've been receiving, my heart is filled with pain.
本日私は、週刊文春を発行する文芸春秋社およびその週刊誌にコメントを発表した東京キリスト教大学の西岡努氏の両名を名誉毀損訴訟の被告として、裁判を起こしました。
Today, I did file a lawsuit charging defamation of character. In other words, I filed a libel suit against two parties. One is the Bungei Shunjun publisher, which publishes the weekly magazine I referred to earlier, Shukan Bunshun. I also am filing charges against a professor of Tokyo International Christian University, ICU, a man named Mr. Tsutomi.
Tokyo. Not international.
Excuse me, the interpreter made a terrible mistake. It's Tokyo Christian University.
Yes, not ICU.
Professor Tsutomi Nishioka. It is not ICU. 失礼しました。
私は私の人権、私の家族の人権、家族の友人の人権、勤務先の北西学園大学の安全を守るためにこの訴訟を 起こしたのであります。
And the reason I filed this libel lawsuit is because I need to protect my human rights, the human rights of my family, my friends, and also the safety of my place of work at the Hokusei Gakuen University.
私は24年前の1991年、朝日新聞大阪社会部時代に韓国で名乗り出た朝鮮人慰安婦のおばあさんの辛い体験の記事を署名入りで2本書きました。
24 years ago in 1991, I was working in the city department or city desk of the Osaka branch of the Asahi newspaper, and I wrote 2 articles about a woman in Korea, an older woman who had worked as what we call in Japan, iyanfu or comfort woman during the war, and she was the first person to come forward to explain her bitter experiences, and so I wrote 2 articles about that.
この記事が原因で23年間ずっとバッシングを受けております。
But as a result of this, for over 2 decades, I've been the target of great bashing.
この記事で私がその存在を報じた方はキム・ガクジュンさん、韓国語ではキム・ハクスンさんとおっしゃる方で、韓国でカミングアウトした第1号の慰安婦でありました。
So the woman that I wrote about was a lady named in English Miss Kim Hak-sung, and she was the first lady to come forward who explained that, confessed that she had been forced to work as a comfort woman.
彼女の勇気ある証言によって、慰安婦の生の証言が世界に伝わって、そしてたくさんの慰安婦の被害者が名乗り出るようになった。
It was tremendously courageous of her to step forward and talk about her very, very difficult past. But because she did have that courage, many, many others followed in her footsteps. And so many,
そういう意味では慰安婦問題が世界に知られるようになったその証言者の第1号のおばあさんでした。
So she was an elderly lady even at that time, but she was the first lady who confessed, came forward and said that she had worked as an iyanfu, which is translated into English quite often as comfort woman or sex slave.
1年前、週刊文春の2月6日号、1年前の2月6日号ですね、今からちょうど1年近く前に発売された記事にですね、その91年のさっき皆さんのお手元にあります91年の8月の記事が批判的に紹介されました。
I mentioned earlier that there was an article in the Shukan Bunshin weekly magazine last year. This was the February 6th issue of last year, and it was one that libeled me, slandered me in a very terrible way, and it focused on an article that I'd written in August of 1991. I think a copy has been distributed to you.
この見出しを見ていただけると分かりますが、慰安婦捏造、朝日新聞記者がお嬢様女子大学教授にというふうにあります。
As you can tell by the title, it is very, very critical. It says that this reporter who fabricates stories is going to become a professor at a university for young ladies.
西岡市、先ほど私が訴えた西岡市ですが、西岡市はこの週刊誌のコメントで、私の記事に対して、強制連行があったかのように記事を書いており、捏造記事と言っても過言ではないというふうにコメントされています。
There are some comments included in that article from the professor I mentioned earlier, Mr. Nishioka. He says that the article that I wrote basically gives the impression that these women were forcibly taken away. The Japanese phrase is kyosei renko, forcibly taken away, and therefore it would not be an overstatement to say that this is a fabricated story, a fabricated article.
この記事であります。皆さん見てください。この記事のですね、本文といいますが、本文の2段落目にですね、女性の話によると、中国東北部で生まれ、17歳の時に騙されて慰安婦にされたと書いてます。
If you look at the actual article, I'm sorry, it's only in Japanese, but in the second paragraph of this article, it says, according to this woman's statement, she was living in the northeastern part of China, and when she was 17 years old, she was tricked or deceived into going to the battlefield.
しかし西岡氏はですね、私のそうした記述にはここでは触れないで、騙されて慰安婦にされたという記事には触れないで、強制連行があったかのように書いており、捏造というふうに言っております。
Of course, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Nishioka does not make any mention of that phrase that I just read to you. Instead, he's again stated that the article gives the impression that the woman was forcibly taken away, this kyosei renko concept, and therefore he says that this article is basically a fabrication.
これはフェアではないと思います。
I do not think that kind of comment is fair.
私の記事はリードで女子挺身隊という言葉を使いました。
In my article, at the beginning of the article, I used the term Joshi Teishintai, which is literally translated as Women's Volunteer Corps.
当時、韓国では慰安婦のことを女子挺身隊、あるいは挺身隊という言葉で表現しておりました。
The reason I use this term was that at the time in South Korea, when we talked about Ianfu or comfort woman, they were referred to as Teishintai, Joshi Teishintai, which again is Women's Volunteer Corps.
しかし、西岡氏は92年の4月ですね、今92年の4月の文藝春秋で、これについて重大な事実誤認というふうに批判しておりました。
However, Mr. Nishioka wrote an article in the April 1992 issue of the monthly Bungae Shunjun magazine, and he said again about this article that there was a serious misunderstanding or mistaken, erroneous assumption or understanding of the facts in this article.
その当時、西岡氏はですね、92年の4月の文藝春秋の記事では、朝日に限らず、日本のどの新聞も、金さんが連行されたプロセスを詳しく報ぜず、大多数の日本人は、当時の日本当局が権力を使って金さんを慰安婦にしてしまったと受け止めてしまったと書いています。
At the time of this article that Mr. Nishioka wrote in April of 1992, he said that it was not just the Asahi newspaper, but actually all Japanese newspapers, none of them looked into detail into this process of how these women were taken and made into comfort women. As a result, the majority of Japanese people were left with the impression that the Japanese authorities had used force, physical force, to take away these women.
しかし、その後はですね、私だけを狙い撃ちにして、批判しております。98年頃からは批判が捏造という言葉に変わりました。
But after this, in spite of the fact that there were other people that he was targeting at that time, after this point, Mr. Nishioka began to target only myself. And from around 1998, his terminology changed. He began to actually use the word fabrication, which the Japanese word is a netsuzo.
同じ91年の記事に対して評価を変えてしまっているんです。
In regard to the article that I wrote in 1991, his evaluation or assessment of the article has changed over time.
フレームアップだと思います。
I think he's trying to frame me, or he's trying to really focus attention all on this article.
そして結局その流れで、去年の2月6日の週刊文春は私を捏造記者とレッテル貼りをしました。
So as a result of this direction that he's been taking for some years now, I think the result was what you saw in the February 6, 2014 Shukan Bunshun article last year, where I was labeled a fabricating reporter.
これはフレームアップの延長線上だと思います。
I believe that this is just simply an extension of this line that he's been taking.
この記事が原因で私の転職先の神戸の女子大学に嫌がらせのメール、電話が多数殺到しました。
As was referred to earlier, as a result of this article, there has been great attacks made on me and also on the university where I was originally to be employed in Kobe, the Kobe Showing Women's University. They received tremendous amounts of protest mails and telephone calls.
そして、私が今勤務している北西学園大学にはさらに多くの抗議のメールや電話がかかってきます。
The numbers of emails and calls that have gone to my current employer, the Hokusei Gakuen University, is even more in number.
そうした抗議の電話の一部はインターネット上に公開されて、さらに憎悪を煽り立てています。
Not only that, but some of the very, very angry phone calls that are given have been called in, are also displayed on the internet. And as a result of being displayed on the internet, it has again fueled even further emotions.
標的は大学だけではありません。私の家族、娘にまで及びました。
The target is not only my university, but also my family, even my daughter.
娘の写真がインターネット上にさらされ、誹謗中傷が書き連ねています。釣られています。
My daughter's photo has been displayed on the internet and has been subjected to terrible comments.
例えばこんなのがあります。こいつの父親のせいでどれだけの日本人が苦労したことか。親父が超絶反日活動で、ちょっとここの文面が不明ですが、超絶反日活動で稼いだ金でという意味だと思うんですが、贅沢三昧に育ったのだろう。自殺するまで追い込むしかない。
Some of the terrible, libelous, slanderous statements that have been made about my daughter is that her father the actions of her father have created so much suffering for untold numbers of Japanese people. Obviously, he has made a great deal of extra money participating in anti-Japanese movements. As a result of this money that he has been able to amass, this daughter has probably been able to grow up in luxury. We have no choice but to somehow drive her to commit suicide.
私のパートナーは韓国人です。つまりうちの娘は父親が日本人で母親は韓国人なのであります。そうすると娘の書き込みにヘイトスピーチのような、コリアンを差別するような言葉まで出てきます。
My partner, my wife, is from South Korea. Therefore, our daughter is half Japanese, half South Korean heritage. As a result of this, you see some comments that are written on the internet about her that use very, very pejorative terms that you sometimes see in hate speeches now.
私はこうした週刊文春の捏造というレッテル貼り、そして西岡市の言説が結果的にこうした状況を引き起こしたのではないかと思っております。
I've described to you some of the terrible things that have been happening, but I believe that this article that appeared last year in the Shukan Bunshun, the comments that have been made by Mr. Nishioka have created the excitement or anger that has led to this kind of violent statements.
司法の場で私は言論の場でも手記を発表して反論をしております。それだけじゃなくて法廷の場でも捏造記者でないことを認めていただこうと思っています。
Of course, I do work in the field of free speech. As a result, I have written articles and I have spoken out to defend my honor and my name. But I'm also going to extend this by fighting in the courts as well to retrieve my good name and to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that I am not a fabricating reporter.
私は捏造記者ではありません。不当なバッシングに屈するわけにはいかないのです。
I am not a fabricating reporter. I am not able to step back and simply bend to or be crushed by this kind of unjust bashing.